Chapter 20. The Siege of Eriden. The horse was exhausted. Ekinroy leaned forward against the stallion's neck as the land continued to fly by, hoping to somehow lend the beast his strength. They had ridden hard through the night and into the morning. With the sun now fully above the horizon before him, the city was finally in sight. As badly as he wanted to storm through the gates and up the hill to the castle to wreak as much vengeance as he could on the invaders who infested the place that had long ago become his home, that was not what he was here to do. He was here to find a mender, a very specific mender, and if the boy was still alive, there was one place in all of Alnorda where he was more likely to be found than any other. The University of Internal Mending was a renowned institution, turning out the world's greatest menders and physicians. People of all nations were welcome to come and learn from the finest teachers, taking their skills and knowledge back to their homelands in an effort to make the world a better place. Healing the world through education was the school's motto. Right now, all that Ekinroy cared about was finding the one person who might have a chance at healing Jaden, Matthias. If the boy had somehow survived and was still at the university, he would find him. If not, his father, Medeus, or another mender would have to do. And if there were no menders to be found, then he would start killing invaders one by one until somebody stopped him. Eriden was spread out to the south of the castle proper, in what was called the Little Willow Bar Triangle, with the university nestled in a wooded grove near the west fork of the Little Willow Bar River. The King's Bridge, south of the city, circumvented the triangle, allowing access to the west gate without having to travel through the city. But Ekinroy did not have the time it took to follow that route. Every minute he wasted could be Jaden's last. He would go through the east gate, and then directly through the city, and he would do it as quickly and quietly as possible. The east gate was really 4 gates, 2 on each side of the river with a bridge in the center. Any invaders attacking by natural means would be assaulted from the outer courtyard walls and the 4 massive stone guard towers before they even reached the bridge, and again from the inner courtyard walls and 4 more identical towers if they somehow managed to cross. Ekinroy had no idea what sort of resistance to expect when he reached the gates. He only knew that he was going to get past them. As he neared the first set of guard towers, he saw that the gate between them had been completely destroyed. 1 down, 3 to go. The second gate had been scorched and splintered in places, but still maintained its integrity and was shut tight, barring his way under the bridge. There was no one visible as he pulled to a halt in the small outer courtyard and dismounted. He wiped some of the froth away from Zadosha's mouth and looked into the horse's eyes. The black stallion snorted, striking the cobblestone lightly with his hoof. "You've got fire in you," he told the horse. "That's good. We're going to need it." The chain winch that opened the gate was housed in the top of the left guard tower, to which the door at the base was barred. A few well-placed kicks splintered the wooden bar, and Ekinroy quickly made his way up the round stairwell. Heaving the trapdoor open at the top, he burst into the room with a dagger drawn. The lone defender of the winch was sprawled on the floor, unmoving and smelling of alcohol. Ekinroy threw the metal lever, and the mechanism that kept the chain from moving gave way with an audible click. The sound of the chain running on its wheels as the gate slowly rose, losing the battle against the counterweights, finally roused the guard. He blinked, looking up at Ekinroy through bleary eyes. Those eyes suddenly went wide with fear. "I know you," he said stupidly. Ekinroy's large knuckles colliding with the man's temple put him soundly back to rest. Confiscating a crossbow that the drunken Irnori soldier had left propped against the wall, he returned to the courtyard. The third gate presented more of a challenge. It too was shut, and there were curious sentries visible in both of the upcoming guard towers. They had been alerted by the opening of the second gate. He kept his head lowered and the hood of his cloak up as he crossed the bridge, leading Zadosh. The big warhorse's hooves made hollow-sounding thuds against the wooden deck. "State your business," demanded the guard on the left, his pompous manner giving him away as Irnori as much as his distinctly patterned leather armor. Ekinroy removed his cowl, and then revealed the crossbow. The bolt took the astonished man in the throat. The guard in the next tower let out a curse, fumbling for his own crossbow. He was just drawing the bolt back when the little 2-sided throwing knife stuck solidly in his chest. Staring down in shock at the unexpected protrusion, he abandoned his own weapon and tentatively pinched at the knife to pull it out. Before he could manage to remove it, another just like it appeared right next to the first. He looked at Ekinroy dumbly, before toppling out of the tower and making a little splash that was quickly lost in the roar of the stream below. This presented a problem. Now there was no way in except...
"How many hands are you, horse?"
"Oi, Morgan, you hear something?"
"Stop your stalling and roll, you rat."
Morgan spit phlegm onto the pavestones. He had already lost a week's pay to Orval, but the dice were just starting to heat up, and if his luck did not turn, he was more than willing to revert to his blade. There was no way on this side of the split that he was going to let a skinny, weasel-faced Crysinian walk away with his money. He was from Ekinroy, after all, same as Norden Merk, and everyone knew that Merk would soon command all of Crysin. What would Merk care if this scum ended his days floating down the willow bar with his throat slit? The filth had turned traitor against his own people, after all.
"I swear I heard something,"
Orval persisted.
"like a yell, and then I heard a splash."
"You heard your mother hollerin' for—"
Both of them stared in alarm as an enormous man pulled himself over the top of the third gate and dropped 15 feet into the courtyard, his boots striking the flagstones with an ominous thump. The intruder stopped, looking right at them. The hilt of a longsword stuck up over one shoulder, and the head of a monstrous mace was visible over the other. More weapons glittered at his belt.
"Oi,"
said Orval.
"Told you I heard something."
"Who's that?"
"Dunno." Then a look of recognition tinged with disbelief crossed Orval's face.
"By the bloody thoughts, that's not good."
The big invader disappeared inside the tower Orval was supposed to be guarding.
"If I'm not mistaken, that's Ekinroy Carthaginian."
"General Carthaginian?"
"Yeah, I ought to know him. He put me in a cell once for stealing chickens."
"He's supposed to be dead."
"He don't look very dead."
"We have to do something,"
Morgan growled as the third gate slowly began to rise.
"Yeah, why don't you go and get him?"
"There's 2 of us, and only 1 of him."
"It's 1 to 1, way I see it. You're the mercenary, I'm just a petty thief. What do you want me to do, steal his horse?"
The legendary general exited Orval's tower, then passed right by them on his way to the tower that Morgan was responsible for. After a few moments, the 4th gate began to rise as well. Then, as casually as if he owned the place, the man passed by them again as he headed back to the big black horse that stood waiting for him on the bridge. Morgan drew his sword.
"I'll deal with you when I get back, coward."
Then he marched determinedly toward the intruding general.
"Not likely,"
muttered Orval under his breath. Sure enough, General Carthaginian did not bother to slow his horse as he cut down Orval's unlucky gambling partner. Orval, never one to cause trouble, cheered the general on as he passed. As soon as Ekinroy was out of sight, he promptly picked up his winnings, plus everything valuable that Morgan had on his person, and headed for the open gates. Something told him it was time to leave Eriden. The city was a ghost town, the stench of death everywhere. Burnt houses and shops lined the once bustling streets, and a thin layer of ash coated everything. Convergence Square in the center of the city, named for the confluence of the 2 rivers, had been the heart of a flourishing trade district. Now the only movement belonged to scavengers and the occasional wind-blown debris. As far as Ekinroy could tell, every citizen of Eriden had fallen under the influence of Grislin's illusion. Having experienced the effects firsthand, he knew that many had probably torn each other apart while thinking that they were attacking their enemies. It was an effort to remain emotionally aloof and concentrate on his mission, but he had a purpose. After making his way swiftly and cautiously to the opposite end of the city without mishap, he looked everywhere for signs of life among the extensive grounds of the university. He searched the meditation areas, groves as the faculty referred to them, the courtyards, and every structure twice over for survivors. It was a written law in every nation that menders were never to be harmed, even in times of war. He did not expect the likes of Norden Merk and his mercenaries to adhere to laws, of course, but as valuable as menders were, it would make sense for him to keep at least some of them alive. If there were none here, the only logical place to look next was the castle. Entering the castle would not be nearly as simple as getting into the city, even if Merk clearly had not left his best soldiers in Eriden. Those men at the gates had probably not had a day of sobriety since their leader had left them, judging by their appearance. He shook his head in disgust. Drunkenness and carelessness were far more prevalent among men who fought for gold, and not to protect the people for whom they were sworn to. The little storeroom was empty, just as it had been the first 2 times he had checked there. He looked again behind the crates and barrels that lined the walls, and again found nothing. Resigning himself for the battle that was certain to come at the castle, he made for the door. A muffled cough stopped him in his tracks. He spun, bewildered. Unless his ears were playing tricks on him, there was someone else in the room. Then he saw it. A thin, square line about 4 feet by 4 feet was barely perceivable on the wooden floor in the very center of the room. Stomping on the square revealed that it was hollow beneath. He searched briefly for something with which to pry up the trap door. Finding nothing at hand, he grudgingly used one of his own knives. The piece of flooring rose just enough for his fingers to find a grip on one side, then the other. He wiggled it free and set it to the side, revealing a ladder that descended into darkness. Cautiously he mounted the ladder, preparing to reach for any number of weapons, depending on who or what might assail him at the bottom. He made it to the floor without incident, then realized that it was not totally dark. What little light there was came from a lit taper in the center of the room. When his eyes adjusted, he saw that he had discovered a long, hidden cellar. The air was cold and smelled of human feces. Sacks of rice and beans were scattered haphazardly, broken open with their contents spread all about. Cheese wheels appeared to have been torn apart unevenly. A wine rack had been knocked over in the corner, giving the illusion that the stone floor was stained with blood. Huddled in various places against the walls, keeping strictly to themselves, was the source of all the chaos. They were dressed all in white, or what had once been white. Each pair of eyes looked expectantly at the newcomer, as though certain he had come to end their miserable existence. There were nearly 30 men and women, physicians and menders, who had apparently sought safety in the cellar. Ekinroy did not know what had kept them from killing each other, nor did he care at the moment. The only thing that mattered was that one of them might have the power to save Jaden. He surveyed the faces of those against the wall nearest him. Ragged, wretched, and filthy, some of them stared back warily, while others hid their faces completely. Most of them were young, some in their middle years, and only one man had gray in his temples and in his unkempt beard. There was a look of wisdom about him, even through the fear. One thing was sure: the longer that he remained in Eriden, the less chance Jaden had of surviving. Time was a luxury that he did not possess. With a tired sigh, he approached the gray-haired man. There was no graceful way to go about it, so he simply grabbed the struggling man and hoisted him over his shoulder. The other's attempt to fight back was so weak that Ekinroy hardly noticed, and his underlayer of chainmail protected him from fingernails and teeth. He was afraid that the thrashing might slow him down, however, so he began to search for some rope. That was when he saw Matthias. Jaden's boyhood friend was even gaunter than Ekinroy remembered, but there was no mistaking that shock of blonde hair or the wire-rimmed spectacles. How many times had he seen the pair of them, inseparable partners in crime, parading about the castle like 2 strutting young cats fighting imaginary monsters or commanding famous battles. Matthias had been the ideal best friend, ready to play at a moment's notice while providing a subtle voice of reason that the wayward young prince often needed. Whether swimming in the willow bar, climbing trees, or evading the royal guard for an unsupervised visit to the theater district, the 2 of them had explored Eriden, and eventually most of Crysin, together. Then Matthias had been accepted to the university, where it was said that he had the potential to become the greatest mender in a generation. There was such a thing as chance, Ekinroy believed, and then there were events that were too much in order to be coincidence. Though he had always put most of his faith in sharp steel and quick reflexes, he was not so arrogant as to believe that the world was totally without outside direction, and he had always felt that when the thoughts laid the path, only a fool refused to walk it. Something had put the idea of finding Matthias in his head, that was for sure, and here the boy was, alive against all odds. Setting the terrified old man down gently, he approached the boy he had watched grow into the spindly young man before him. To his amazement, Matthias did not appear at all frightened. In fact, he looked quite calm.
Matthias?
He hoped that somehow the sound of his own name might reach the young man's mind through the illusion.
I am Ekinroy, General Ekinroy Carthaginian. Do you remember me?"
Matthias's expression did not change as he very slowly reached out a skinny arm and positioned his palm on Ekinroy's chest. Ekinroy placed his own hand over that of the young mender, taking the gesture as an affirmative. Something was wrong. Ekinroy's chest began to clench painfully. He tried to remove Matthias's hand, but an invisible force held it plastered to him as effectively as if their skin were connected. His ribcage began to shake, and his bones felt like they might splinter at any moment. He realized that Matthias was using his gift of mending not to heal, as a mender was trained to do, but to do him physical harm, to kill him. The effects of most magic on Ekinroy had long been subdued, lessened to a point where he could survive an attack that might blast another man to bits or shatter his mind. The bond shared between him and his master prevented him from taking the full brunt of magical power, but now, with Spirion nearly powerless, it seemed that the same rules did not apply. He would have to do something fast, or his mission might end in utmost failure.
"I am sorry, boy."
Clenching his fist, he brought the base of his mail gauntlet down hard on top of Matthias's head. The frail young man collapsed. Ekinroy gasped as the pressure was released, clutching at his heart to be sure that it was still beating. Once he decided that his vitals were still performing as they should, he scooped up the unconscious mender in training and carried him toward the ladder. The ordeal had been swift and intense, but now there was reason for excitement. He believed that he may have just found the one man who could save the future King of Crysin. Zadosh was right outside where he had left him, staring with those two intelligent eyes as if to say, "What took you so long?" Ekinroy marveled at the warhorse's training, suspecting that Spirion had a hand in the animal's uncanny perception and endurance. Of all the mages, his master was known to have the closest association with animals. Master. That was going to take some getting used to. Before recent events, it had been over a decade since he had last seen Spirion. Being anointed the wizard's champion seemed an event that had taken place in another lifetime, to another man. He was General Carthaginian now, responsible for the protection of a great kingdom, not Sir Ekinroy, knight of North Calas and head butcher for a whimsical king. True, it had been Spirion who had commanded that he offer his services to Eriden after his falling out with Cragmere, but his loyalty had belonged to the Ryanthorns alone for years now. Eriden had become his closest friend, and turned out to be the best man, the best king he had ever known. Now his friend was dead, and his allegiance suddenly seemed in turmoil. His oath decreed that he bend to the wizard's commands, but all he could think about was seeing that Jaden took the throne, and that he was there by the young man's side to help guide him through the pitfalls of ruling. Thoughts willing, Spirion would never ask him to choose his sworn duty over the boy. If that day came, the noble knight turned first man-at-arms, turned general of Crysin's forces, would be forced to make a terrible choice. An impatient snort brought him out of his uncharacteristic musings.
"You are right, horse. It is time we were gone from this place."
The absence of people on the campus was still an eerie sight. When he had been here in the past, white-robed men and women of all ages had bustled about the place, alive with the discovery of the secrets of their craft. They were an order who had dedicated their lives to helping others, sacrificing the company of friends and family to train in their selfless profession. Even after their training was complete, few accepted more than a hot meal and the occasional lodging as payment for their art, and any who did accept more were frowned upon by their peers. Now many of them were likely dead. Those who remained in Eriden huddled in fear in a cramped cellar that reeked of human waste, denied even each other's company. The ones who did survive this nightmare might never be the same after their ordeal. Clenching his jaw to hold his anger in check, he gently laid Matthias across the shoulders of the big horse and pulled himself up behind. Jaden could save those poor souls in the cellar, but first the prince needed saving himself. Spurring Zadosh into motion, he left the university behind at a gallop. They reached the east gate quickly, the sun now high in the mostly cloudy sky. As they entered the large inner courtyard, he brought Zadosh to a jarring halt. Standing between them and the bridge was a force of about 100 soldiers. In the front of the crowd was a huge, unshaven man in the traditional studded leather armor of Ekinroy. His eyes were bleary, and his hair tousled, as if he had just risen from slumber, but he had a wicked grin on his face. Ekinroy knew him.
"Good day, General,"
the man said cordially.
"I must say that I am surprised to see you here."
Balgraz, Norden Merk's first lieutenant, had not changed. The last time Ekinroy had seen him was in the command tent on the field of battle at the Split, where he had stood grinning next to Merk as the two of them promised to lead their troops into the fray at King Urien's signal. The signal had come, but the promised support had not.
"Hello, Balgraz. The surprise is mine. I never thought I would see the front of you with a battle looming. Arrogant to the end, my friend. I suppose you are going to kill us all by yourself? You must fulfill your duty, after all, whatever you have decided that is today." "Duty is a word that you and your master would not understand." Perhaps not. What I do understand is that I have 100 men, and you have... who is your friend there? Is that an unconscious physician? I do hope for your sake that he revives himself in time to fix all of the holes we are going to put in you."
Balgraz's men had a good laugh at the comment. Ekinroy looked them over with distaste. They were an unsavory lot, unkempt and slouching, clearly little more than undisciplined criminals. Unfortunately, they were between him and his goal, and many of them already had bows or crossbows trained on him. One wrong move, and not only would he die, but the hopes of the entire kingdom would die with him. Beyond Balgraz and his men, the remaining 3 gates still stood tantalizingly open. With all of their focus on him, he was sure that they had failed to notice the riders in the distance. He smiled.
"While I admire your calm demeanor in the face of defeat, I do look forward to wiping that smile from your big, self-righteous face, my lord. Now, kindly dismount and throw down your arms."
Ekinroy spat.
"Why don't you come and take them from me?" "Gladly, when you are good and dead."
The bleary-eyed first lieutenant raised his hand to give the order.
"I hope you have enough arrows for my friends,"
Ekinroy said quickly, pointing toward the riders. Balgraz paused, but did not turn around.
"Nice try. I am quite sure that—" "Look!"
someone yelled. He did look then, and at the same time Ekinroy dug his heels into Zadosha's side. The warhorse crashed into Balgraz at full speed, mowing Merk's first lieutenant down like an errant weed. Reaching out, Ekinroy ripped a round studded shield from the back of a surprised soldier. Leaning all the way forward, he covered his head and most of Matthias's limp form with his shield, as Zadosh continued to flatten anyone too slow to jump out of his way. The thuds of horse colliding with man quickly stopped, and he heard the change in surfaces from stone to wood as they sped onto the East Gate Bridge. He kept his head down as arrows began to whiz by, switching the shield from his front to his back. 2 arrows stuck in the shield simultaneously, and one struck him in the exposed portion of his lower back. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he risked a quick glance at the approaching set of towers. They were still empty, as was the pair after that. When he passed through what remained of the first gate, he finally looked back. The confused mercenaries were just beginning to mount a pursuit. About 20 men on horseback were milling about, yelling at one another and pointing east. Balgraz was nowhere in sight. Reaching back to inspect the spot where the arrow had struck him, he found that his chain shirt had deflected the head, keeping it from penetrating. It was already sore and was certain to leave a nasty bruise, but presented no immediate danger. He inspected the back of his mount as well and found nothing amiss. Matthias was still out cold, but had also managed to escape harm. They had made it. Jaden's fate now rested in the strong, sleek legs of the black stallion and the healing power of his best friend. The approaching riders were soon close enough that he could make them out. Tevius was in the lead, a silly grin on his boyish face, with 50 or so young cavalrymen in tow. As badly as he wanted to yell at the man for showing the enemy that they had numbers, he had to admit that his timely appearance might have just saved the kingdom. The Ernories were already in the process of closing the gates, which would not be so easy to pass the next time. Ekinroy had a plan for that, though. Cheers went up from the riders as he neared them. When it became obvious that he was not going to slow, Tevius banked far to the right and swung back around to come up beside him.
Hail, Dragon Slayer!
How fares the prince?
Alas, we departed not 10 minutes on your heels. His condition had not changed in that time. You ride like the wind, great one. The thoughts surely lend strength to your mount.
Ekinroy could see that Tevius's horse was near its end. Its breathing was labored, and lather covered its neck.
Rest those horses,
he commanded.
Then split up and guard both gates. See that no one leaves the city.
He could tell by the wild gleam in the man's eye that he was ready for battle.
Do not attack the city,
he added pointedly. Tevius looked disappointed. Bending low, Ekinroy spurred the black stallion on, leaving the young man and his entourage far behind. Their cheers were quickly lost in the rush of the wind as he raced through the clearing. The warm glow of the setting sun penetrated the canvas, illuminating the inside of the little tent. The clouds had disappeared, and the night promised to be clear and cold. Jaden lay on his back, alone with Sidra, who had not left him since morning. Spirion had done something to numb the pain in his side, and was now resting in his own tent from the effort. The difference had been barely noticeable, but he had breathed a little easier for a short time. The effect had passed quickly, though, and it was becoming obvious that Jaden's time had expired. Sidra gently wiped beads of perspiration from his brow with a clean cloth. He was sweating and shivering at the same time, cold even beneath multiple layers of blankets. His breathing was ragged and shallow, and his vision had become blurry, but he still managed a grateful smile for her. The light formed a glowing halo around her red hair, giving her a supernatural appearance like one of the thoughts incarnate. He tried to hold on to the image as long as he could, even as the light began to dim. Voices sounded nearby, shouting. Sidra's face solidified once more as it neared his own. She whispered something incomprehensible in his ear and gently turned his head to the side. The face before him was the last he expected to see. Matthias looked tired, weak, and scared. Jaden knew he might be hallucinating, but it was still comforting to see that face again. Sidra took his hand and placed it atop that of his old friend. Barely perceptible through the new numbness that was quickly spreading over all his body now, was a familiar tingle. Then darkness took him.